Hey, welcome. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can have ｃloseBot process images. And if you don't know what closeBot is, put simply, it's a text-based conversational AI provider. That was a mouthful of words, but in short, essentially, it is using AI to automatically qualify and book your leads. Very similar to Go High Level's conversational AI. Now, a big problem that Go High Level's conversational AI and closeBot and many other AI chat providers have is that they have trouble processing images. And that's a problem because humans tend to send images very often. Think about how you text your friends, or maybe how you text a contractor. If you're asking for a quote for carpet cleaning, maybe you take a picture of a stain on the carpet and ask them, hey, how much will this be? Well, unfortunately, many conversational AI providers don't automatically process that image in a way that the AI understands it and responds appropriately. And so this is very important to industries like contractors, tattoo studios, salons, artists, you name it. There's a lot of use cases for processing images in conversations. Now, how do we solve this? Now, we solve this by essentially taking an image. I put here an image is worth 1,000 words. We don't necessarily need 1,000 words, but how do we take that image and turn it into text? And quite simply, just brief text, make it descriptive enough for the AI to be able to process it and respond appropriately, but sort of remove all the ambiguity and variations that can come from long descriptions of a specific image. Put simply, we're going to translate the image into a brief description. Now, before we move on, if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Justin, and I like to make content on this channel showing you exactly how I solve problems in my business for me and my clients and people in the automation station community. All this stuff here, there is going to be a handout here. I'll show you. There's some code that we're going to need to incorporate into our workflow. And before you get afraid of complexity, I promise you I've done my best and iterated on this to make it very simple. But I will provide a link to this inside the description so you can download this and use it as you build this out for your application. Moving on, there is an important limitation that I'm going to do my best to explain. And put simply, you need to turn off always aware AI. And where is that setting, you might ask? Inside of closeBot, if you come into the modify bot settings, and right over here under general settings, you will have to turn off always aware AI. Now, this is a decision that you will have to make for you and your clients, but essentially always aware AI, as it says right here, when this is on, your bot will know about all recent messages from the contact, whether the bot sent them or not. We recommend leaving this on. It does not work with HIPAA sub-accounts. Okay, so they recommend keeping it on because it always gives the bot context. No matter if the bot sent the message or a human sent the message, the bot will maintain context of that entire conversation, and that's important for bot performance in the long term. But for this application, you actually have to turn it off, and I'll do my best to explain why, and maybe if closeBot team member reads this, I think they can fix this. But essentially, if it's turned on, the bot is actually processing the message that it's pulling from the always aware AI. So closeBot and Go High Level are synced on the back end because you connect them, and it's pulling that message from the always aware AI and processing that instead of the message that we send in our workflow using this webhook. And they may fix it, they may not. However, if this is a use case that you want to explore, you're going to have to weigh the options, whether always aware AI is important or image processing is important. So I do want to be very clear about that limitation. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the workflow. So the goals of this workflow is to keep it simple, okay? We don't want to spend extra money where we don't need to, premium actions and stuff. We're going to try to keep that to a minimum. And then we don't want to add additional workflows because we've seen in the past, especially if you've been a closeBot user for a while, you get into modifying these workflows, all of a sudden you have massive success. You deploy this over 1,000 clients, and then you have to go and maintain them all. It's a big pain. And so if we don't have to add additional workflows, but make minor modifications to the existing workflow instead, I want to go that route. Now, the workflow that we're going to be modifying is one that you're pretty familiar with if you are a closeBot user. closeBot is pretty awesome, and it only requires one workflow to operate. And this is the very simple workflow that it has. We're going to go ahead and modify this slightly so that you don't have to create a new workflow, but just add to the existing workflow. And we won't degrade performance for your normal conversations that don't have images. So let's hop in here. I'm going to show you a high-level overview. So here's what we want to do essentially. So this is just a high-level overview. We're triggering this workflow with a customer reply, just like you're used to. But instead, what we're doing is we're storing the image attachment. I'll explain why this is important here. Then we're determining if the image attachment actually exists or not. If it does exist, we're going to send it off to OpenAI so that they can visualize and translate the description of the image. And then we're going to parse the response and send a modified webhook to 𝐭𝐸 so that it includes the description of the image that OpenAI analyzed. And then we're going to clear the field. I'll explain why this is important as well. Now, if there's no attachment, meaning there's no image, there's just text, then it's business as usual, and we're just going to send a normal webhook out to 𝐭𝐸. So let's go ahead and build that out together. Like I said, everything that's in here, I don't expect you to pause the video and have to copy and paste it, especially when dealing with JSON. You miss one quote and you'll mess up the whole thing. So I will provide this handout to you. So let's hop in and create the workflow. So I'm here in a practice sub account. There are no contacts. Let's go to automations, and I have this bot processing workflow that is essentially the workflow that I just showed you. This is the basic workflow that you probably have installed in your account right now. And we're just going to work with this and modify it. First thing I want to do is before this webhook, I'm going to store the message attachment. And what do I mean by store the message attachment? I'm going to add an update contact field workflow action, and I'll name this store message attachment. And I should have told you that before this, I created a custom field. Matter of fact, let's do that together because I don't want to get far ahead. So let's go to settings and then go into custom fields. And I want to make sure that you create a field called message attachment. So you can add a field, make it a single line, and then name it message attachment. You can name this whatever you want, but I'm naming it message attachment. You can put it inside of additional info. I already have one created, so I'm not going to click save here, but you would. And do that before you go in and modify this workflow. So now that we have that created, let's go back into the workflow. And then let's add this workflow action, which is update contact field. We're going to rename this message attachment update. And we're going to search for that custom field that we created, which is message attachments. And then in here, I'm going to click this little tag, go down to messages, and then click on message attachments, and that will place a variable in there. Now, the reason why we do this is because we need to be able to evaluate whether the message has attachments or not. And there is another way to do this, but in the spirit of avoiding cost and premium workflows, we need to determine if this field has something in it or if it's empty. The other way to do this is with a custom code workflow action, which is a premium action, and it costs 1 penny every execution. But if you use the custom code, then you can essentially pull the message in and determine if it has any attachments, and then make a conditional statement afterwards. But not to confuse you, we're storing the attachment here in this field. Whether there's an attachment or not, it doesn't matter. If there's no attachment, then that field will remain empty, and that's exactly what we're evaluating. So the next workflow step we will add is an if statement. So we'll click on if else here, and I'll name this is there an attachment ? Branch 1 will be yes. And so if we'll click on contact details and look for that message attachments, it's plural. If message attachments is not empty, meaning there's something in it because there was an attachment, and that something's going to be a URL of the attachment. If it's not empty, then go down the yes route, because that means there is an attachment, right? So if there is an attachment, that means there's an image or maybe also audio. We're going to focus on images here. Then we need to do something with it. And that something is essentially send it off to OpenAI in order for us to turn that image into text, as I mentioned earlier. So let me go ahead and reference my notes here. But we're going to pop this open and look for custom webhook and click on custom webhook. All right. And we're going to name this custom webhook OpenAI image processing. You can name this whatever you want. The event is going to be custom. The method is going to be post. And then if I come over to my handy dandy handout here, I'm going to copy the URL. All the settings are documented in here, and I'm going to paste it For authorization, I'm going to select bearer token, and this does require for you to have an OpenAI key. You can Google how to get your OpenAI key. I'm not going to cover this and that in this video, but it's super simple to do. I already have one. So if you come over here, it'll have you select your bearer token. I have one already created. If you have one already created that's valid, you can just go ahead and select it. If you don't, you can just click create new key, name the key, whatever you want. I name mine OpenAI, and then you just paste your key in there and then click create. Okay. I already have one created, so I'm just going to select my OpenAI key. And then down here in content type, you can leave that as application JSON. And then for the raw body, you're just going to want to delete that. And let's go back to our handout, and then let's copy this JSON and paste it. Now, when we do this, I just remove the additional spaces at the end because we don't need it. Be careful not to delete the close squiggly bracket. Now, when we do this, you notice that the image URL right here has, matter of fact, let's start at the top. We're going to break this down just a little bit. So the model we're using is GPT 4.1 mini. I found that on average, I was spending about a half a penny every time I ran it. And so that's pretty efficient, and it's actually really fast. You can experiment with different models if you want, but my testing was a GPT 4.1 mini. Our system prompt here is very simple. I said, you describe images in exactly 50 characters, and that is it. Again, for your use case, this may be different. Maybe you want to add to the system prompt for specific styling. Maybe you want more than 50 characters. I'd recommend keeping it small. Again, you don't want the AI to sort of get lost in its description and confuse 𝐭𝐫. So feel free to modify that if you want. And then the user message just says, give me a 50-character description of this image. And then we provided the image URL right here. Now, for testing, and you're going to have to do this as well, because as you're building the workflow, you won't be able to save this until you actually test it. It's asking for a URL. Now, we are going to provide that message attachments value. You can also do the custom value that you created, but we are going to provide that message attachments, right? However, right now for testing, I need to actually put a URL in there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a URL that I have just for testing, and I'll show you what it is here. So this is a URL. This is an attachment that I had sent earlier. Whenever you send a message to Go High Level, it gets converted into a link because it's stored in the cloud. And so the way it gets referred in the database is a link. But this is essentially an image, a random image that I'm going to pass in there so that we can do some testing. So I'm going to copy that. And then I'm just going to replace this message attachments variable here with that URL. There you go. And we are going to save a response from this webhook. And then we need a contact to test. And so it's not going to allow me to save. Let me create a contact because I don't have a contact saved right now. Let me come over here and just create a test contact. Now, we just need a test contact because we need to refer to a contact in order to test it inside the workflow. I should have created that before filming this video, but this is real life, so we're going to move on. So here, we come down here. Let's go back to where we left off. We're going to save a response from this webhook, and now we can select our contact, and let's send this request. Cool. You should get a success code 200, which means it worked. And then if we come down here, let's review the response. And so if we come down here, we have all this data. We're really focused in on this choices section. And you see we have a message, and this is essentially the response from the OpenAI. It's like you using ChatGPT, except we're using it via an API. And it's describing in 50 characters or less what the image was. Remember, the image was this. So let's see what AI said. Screenshot of an HTTP request error with circled text. That's exactly what that is. And this is a pretty poor image. So it did a really good job at describing it. And so cool. That's exactly what we need. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to choices. I'm not going to go into data structures too deeply, but OpenAI doesn't really make it easy for us. This is a little hacky in the sense of how we need to parse this data. But essentially, we need to get access to this choices object here. And this is an array. So I'm not even going to go into it. We're going to need to create a workflow action after this to make sure we parse out this array. Because if we don't, we won't be able to actually access this nested value here, which is content. You notice it's indented a few times in. So we need to access it here. And I'll show you how we do that here. But before we do that, I'm going to come over here and replace this link with my message attachments. Message attachments. Oh, that's annoying. Go high level tries to be helpful, and sometimes they're not. Yeah. Why do you add an extra? Okay. Let me just clean this up a little bit. Awesome. So you should have one set of double quotes, open and close, and then double squiggly brackets, message.attachments in the URL section. That way it will actually fill in this variable with whatever attachments came in on that message. So let's go ahead and save this and save the workflow. Now, I mentioned we need to parse that response. And so we're going to come in here and we do have to use a premium workflow action. I'll explain the cost here in a second for this whole thing. But this premium workflow action is only going to get called if somebody sends you an image. Okay. It won't get called if somebody doesn't send you an image. So let's say action type is going to be, let me check out my notes here. Okay. So what we want to do here is find by index, and then we want to pull open the webhook we just sent, and that's choices. Remember I mentioned that choices section where it had the nested values, and the index is going to be 0. We'll click save and save. And now that's going to give us the option to actually, I'm going to show you why we needed to do that here in a second, but to actually pull out the response of that message. So now what we need to do here is we're going to modify this webhook. So this is the standard webhook from 𝐭𝐴Zebot. We'll call this 𝐭𝐴Zebot modified. And we're going to add custom data here, and we're going to give it a key of message. Casing matters here, so do not capitalize the M, do not add an extra space or anything. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually add the message body. So that is the text. Let's say somebody sent a text and an image in one message. Well, we want to process the actual text in addition to the image description that we just generated with OpenAI. So we're going to select the message body, which is going to be the text message. I'm going to give it a space. And then I'm actually going to come down here to, I'm going to show you what happens if we didn't have this array function. So if we go to custom webhook, we have the response from the OpenAI image processing. We can click on it. And remember, we wanted to look at choices. Well, you notice there's no arrow here. We can't go deeper into the choices section. And that's why we needed to use the array function so that we can essentially pull out that choices section and get everything else that was provided with that. And inside of that response in that choices section was the AI response that we really need. So if we come back over here and go to our array function, pop this open, now we could see the message content value, which is actually what we're interested in inside of that response. So I'll go ahead and click that. And now we have our message body space and then our message content. Now, this is essentially if I texted, can I get this tattoo, and sent an image, it would say, can I get this tattoo, and then space and the description of the image. You can modify this if you want to. I find leaving it just like this in testing worked pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and click save here and save that. And then one last thing we need to do on this side is we need to clear the message attachments field. Because if the user responds again without an attachment, we don't want that attachment evaluation to give us a false positive. So let's click update contact field, and we will name this clear message attachments. Action type is going to be clear field, and then we're going to search message attachments, the custom field that we created, and click save and save the workflow. Awesome. So now we have our modified 𝐭𝐴Zebot workflow that essentially evaluates whether an attachment was provided or not. If it was, we process the image, we turn it into text, and then we send it to 𝐭𝐴Zebot. Now we need to account for what happens if there's just a normal text message, which is probably 99% of your conversation. We still need to send the message out to 𝐭𝐴Zebot. So if we come over here, we'll click copy. We're going to copy this action, which is just a 𝐭𝐴Zebot webhook. We're going to remove modified here because this one's not going to be modified. And then I'm just going to delete this custom data and leave it stock just like it was from the get-go. Click save. And so now if there's no attachment, it's just going to go business as usual. It's not going to use any premium webhook functions or anything. It's not going to cost us any more. And it's just going to come down here and process the message just like normal. Now, cost. What does this cost right here? Let me break that down for you. Let me add a note here just so you guys can see it. Okay. So what does this cost? So on average, during testing, the GPT vision with GPT 4.1, as I mentioned, cost about half a penny for every execution. And then the array premium function cost you a penny for every execution. And I believe the first 100 executions and a sub account with a premium workflow action is actually free. And so you're looking at an additional penny and a half for processing text messages with images. And so I think that's pretty fair. And maybe in the future, 𝐭𝐫 or Go High Level will provide functionality natively and you can reduce costs. But I think that's not going to break the bank for anybody who's doing business and needs image processing. So last thing we need to do is test it. So let's go ahead and publish this workflow. And the first thing I'm going to do, I have a demo bot here. This is a tattoo booking bot that I built. Always Aware AI is turned off, as I mentioned, and it is integrated into my demo account that I'm using, Vets Wash Houses. And I'm going to send it a text message. And let's see. I'm going to send a text message first without an image, and I'm going to see if this works. So let's pop over here. Let me pull this up so you can see. We have, it's taking a second to send. Anytime I click record, Go High Level slows down. I'm pretty sure it's a feature that they have. All right, so we receive the message, just says, hey there. We'll give it a second for 𝐭𝐫 to process this. If we come into enrollment history, we should see that we had an execution here. If I look at the execution history, the path, that there was no attachment, so it went down and just went down the normal path, right? And so if I come here into the conversations, you see this had no attachment, and we got a response from 𝐭𝐿SBot saying, hey, what kind of tattoo are you thinking about? So here is where a lot of folks, especially for my tattoo clients, will just send an image, right? And it'll sort of break the bot. And so let's go ahead and send the image. And that might take a second to come through, but you'll see it pop up here whenever it is sent. All right, so our image came in. And so if you see this image, it's just a random image of a tattoo that somebody likes. If we come back into our workflow and refresh this, we could see that our contact is actually coming through this side because there was an image this time. And so let's give that a second to complete. Sometimes the OpenAI processing takes an extra few seconds. There could be errors in our workflow. We just built this live. And so if there is, we'll troubleshoot live because it's almost certainly going to happen to you guys as you start building out complex workflows like this. So let's give it a second to process. Okay, looks like it processed. If we come in here into the execution logs and let's look at the OpenAI image processing, we could see here that the content right here is actually the 50-character description. And let's see if 𝐭𝐿SBot responded. Nice choice. Do you prefer more traditional floral design or something a bit more abstract? So awesome. 𝐭𝐿SBot took that because we executed the workflow in the way we did. We had an attachment, we processed it with AI, we pulled out that value, and then we sent it over to 𝐭𝐿SBot. If we come over to 𝐭𝐿SBot and look at our dashboard, you should see the image description. So we go to this contact here and you noticed that the message that got sent was delicate black line floral tattoo on inner arm skin. Well, I didn't say that. I just sent an image. And so AI automatically put that in there and we modified our 𝐭𝐿SBot API call so that it received that message. And you could see from the response, the context essentially is asking for more details on that tattoo, but it's acknowledging that it saw that image. Just like that, we were able to process images with 𝐭𝐿SBot. Now, I'm going to leave it at that because that solves the problem. Let me make sure there wasn't anything else I needed to show you guys. Nope. I think that's it. Again, if you're new here, click subscribe. I would really love to have you as a subscriber. I like to teach stuff just like this as I solve problems in my businesses and businesses of people in my community or some of my clients. This handout here will be available inside the School Community Automation Station. I will post about this video. You can go in there and download this so that you can implement it in your business. Hopefully you found this helpful, and till next time, peace.